Blood links between relatives have been practiced, as strange as it may seem, almost since ancient times. And despite the harsh reality that this led to descent and hemophilia, this practice flourished almost until the 20th century. And already in the era of advanced human development, blood marriages turned into just insane paranoia of some individuals. And this is the topic of this episode: the ridiculous blood ties in our history. Welcome to Flip Side of History. Let's continue this episode. We will begin our story with the following chapter: the ancient past in the Middle Ages. Even in ancient Egypt, it was believed that the pharaohs, as children of God, should not be combined with unrelated ties, so as not to spoil the divine blood. So the traditions of such ties at that time were, so to speak, at the legislative level. The mummies of the pharaohs examined by scientists without a single doubt prove that incest was constant, so many of the ancient lords had serious health problems. For one instance, in the tomb of Tutankhamun, who died at the age of 19, many different canes and sticks were found. Moreover, the pharaoh had congenital lameness and apart from that, a hump. All this was the result of incest. If you look at the well-known biographies of the rulers of ancient Egypt, then it's definitely clearly indicated that the heirs to the throne often appeared only as a result of purely biologically related marriages. And the well-known Cleopatra VII married twice with her brothers from the Ptolemaic dynasty, 13th and 14th. And everything would be fine, but the issue was that both brothers were at the same time brothers of Cleopatra herself. True, fortunately, Cleopatra did not give birth to heirs from her brothers, or nothing is known about them, so with little blood it pretty much ended. The Roman Emperor Nero, famous for his crazy antics and fanciful sexual debauchery, was fond of incest by inheritance. The thing is that his mother Agrippina originally married her own uncle, Emperor Claudius, who, at the request of his wife, adopted the son of the plebeian Nero. Who knew? Nero himself, after ascending the throne, almost passionately kissed his mother without any shame, and almost all of Rome spoke about their unnatural relationship on the sidelines. More than that, incest in Rome was categorically prohibited, but Nero and his mother were so carried away that even the emperor's lover warned that the Roman army will not tolerate such blasphemy. In some African kingdoms and states, incest was also the most common thing for monarchs. In the dynasty, for example, Monomotapa in Zimbabwe, one of the rulers in the harem had about 3,000 wives, and the oldest wives were his own sisters and daughters. The same traditions were in the Balubelu tribe, where the so-called Queen of Rain ruled. And the dynasty began with incest, when the first queen, while still being a princess, Jugundini, gave birth to her brother. Traditional customs of incest existed also in Hawaii, and everyone treated what happened within the royal family with respect. So marriages between relatives, if did offend someone in any case, then just the Christian missionaries who were actively working there at that time. For one example, at the beginning of the 19th century, Princess Nahiniena was born, who gave birth to a child from her brother, later King Kamehameha III. Although indeed, the child turned out to be completely unviable and died a year later, and soon after the death of her own daughter, the princess herself died of grief. In Siam, where the state was actually transformed by King Rama V, who freed the state from colonial oppression and slavery, the traditions of incest usually mixed with the traditions of polygamy. In the king's harem, there were 4 wives and more than 1,500 concubines, from whom a total of 77 children were born. The most outstanding thing is that only children born from 4 sisters of Rama V were considered the official heirs to the throne. European thrones were also not left without attention. For example, the first in the history of Portugal, Queen Maria I, nicknamed the Mad, was married to her own uncle, Pedro III, so named after the coronation to the throne, who was the younger brother of the queen's father. Their son José decided to continue the tradition by marrying his own aunt. But the most striking example of incest, which has become the most curious, is the pedigree of the Austrian monarchical family. Empress Elizabeth herself was already, let's say, the product of incest, since her mother gave birth to her husband, who was a cousin. Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter in a marriage who later married the second cousin, Leopold. Elizabeth's mother-in-law and aunt, Archduchess Sophie, without denying it, disliked her niece and daughter-in-law. But family controversy eased up when Sophie's sister, Caroline, married Emperor Franz Joseph's grandfather, Franz II. As a result, Caroline became both an aunt and a grandmother for the emperor, and also a mother-in-law for her sister Sophie. Thus, the well-known sketch became a reality long before its own appearance. A strikingly good example of incest among the monarchs, and also marriage, despite being unofficial, was concluded between Harold II Godwinson, the last king of England before its capture by William the Conqueror, and his own second cousin, Edith, who among common people was nicknamed Swan Neck. The woman gave birth to 6 children out of wedlock, as the church refused to bless the marital relationship between relatives. Apart from that, another example of incest is, indeed, one of the most powerful and obviously known European dynasties, the Habsburgs. To avoid the fragmentation of lands and territories between heirs, the Habsburgs actively adhered to the thesis that in order to preserve wealth and strengthen power, marriages should be concluded exclusively between relatives. Hence, many historians believe that the incredibly powerful dynasty came to be precisely due to marriages between relatives. But on the one hand, this in advance reduced the severity of the problem with land and dowry. Everything was in the same exact hands. But on the other hand though, hemophilia ran like a red strain through the entire dynasty. If being more accurate at the time for them, it was simply worth it. Thanks to such marriages, there was actually no fragmentation of territories during the division between the heirs. All the results of incest converged in King Charles II of Spain, whose father was his mother's uncle, and his mother was the daughter of cousins in marriage. According to the researchers, the so-called coefficient of inbreeding characterizing incest was equal to 25%. This criterion has children born from a marriage between a sister and a brother. Researchers collected portraits of 15 representatives of the Habsburgs and compiled a pedigree containing 20 generations, including more than 6,000 representatives of this family. The results of the external examination portraits were analyzed by maxillofacial surgeons. It turned out that the infamous extraordinary lower jaw, the generic mark of the Habsburgs, is nothing more than a deviation in the development of the face, which was the result of incest. The Habsburg dynasty serves as a kind of laboratory for this, since the level of inbreeding in it is astonishingly high. The Colt family's shocking incest. In Australia, in the early 2000s, an extraordinary Colt couple was discovered. They lived in the woods, surrounded by fortified tents and old wagons. Of course, the family lived quite isolated for a long time, so the police who arrived in the camp could not immediately understand what exactly was happening here. Only 12 children lived deep in the forest, and most of them had developmental delays. As it was established later, the whole family, and this is almost 40 people, are members of single family. Children were born from ties between siblings, so in fact, the camp became a model of incest for 4 generations. The foremother of the clan, June Colt, was born from a sister and brother, and after marriage, together with her husband, they preferred an isolated life from others, giving birth to 2 sons and 4 daughters within the marriage. Moving on in time, the clan was headed by daughter Betty, who later gave birth to 13 children. The genetic examination shocked everyone. The fathers of the children were their own father and brothers. By the way, as husband and wife in a separate tent at the time of the police visit, Charlie and Martha, brother and sister, lived. What will strike one's mind the most is that in this perverted conglomerate, parents encouraged sexual relations from the age of 12 years old, and the children themselves did not see anything strange in spending the night with their father, uncle, aunt, or brother. Furthermore, even 8 and 9-year-olds were involved in heavy criminal activity. It all started with perversions such as oral kinds of actions, and then moved on to classic sexual activity. And what's more to add here is that the perverted logic of adult family members unequivocally demanded a ban on frequent births. That being so, they helped many pregnant girls to provoke a miscarriage, or openly encouraged and even had abortions. In addition to incest, the ideology of the Colt family assumed that neither hygiene nor parenting was important, so dirt and sanitary conditions reigned in the camp with all kinds of ensuing problems. Most of all, the police were surprised when they found a kangaroo sleeping peacefully in one of the beds. The question is, how did they hide from police for all that time? You see, the Colts could hide exclusively by a traveling lifestyle. They often moved from one place to another, so even the most attentive neighbors could not help but have a sneaking feeling about anything. The so-called dugout was discovered when, during one of the stops, the children were simply allowed to walk to a local rural settlement. Communicating with other children, Colt's children accidentally let slip that their sister had recently given birth, and they could not remember from whom, either from her brother or from her uncle. Children from this settlement who heard the news quickly told the adults about it. All adult members of this family were arrested in 2012 and put on trial. The children were placed in foster families, but many remained with unexperienced psychological, physical and moral injuries, and these traumas stayed until the end of their days. They were arrested on July 18th of 2012, and photos of the arrest appeared in many local and foreign publications. But despite the needed medical help given to them, many couldn't recover from the traumas experienced. In justifying the removal of children from the family, the judge stressed that the children lived in inappropriate conditions, their whole lives were endangered, and no one took care of their health, education, and other vitally important aspects of life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy watching our episodes and find them educational, apart from being entertaining, then leave a like and subscribe to Flip Side of History, and we see you in the next episode.